Welcome back to the channel. It's Eli Infante with another full edit Photoshop tutorial where I cover my process from beginning to end in Photoshop, from skin retouching to color grading, and how I use the infinite color panel to finalize my images. I did provide a raw file in the description, so if you want to follow along and try to edit this photograph, you're more than welcome to download it. Also, if you want to see the behind the scenes of how I took this photograph, follow me on Instagram because that's where I post all of my behind the scenes content. Before we start, I do want to announce I'm starting a new YouTube live series where I edit your photographs. So if you want to participate, send your raw images to infantecritique@gmail.com. I'll put it here on the bottom. And I already did episode 1. Max sent this awesome image and we did the whole edit live and people were participating. It was a lot of fun. So if you want to participate, email those images. And now let's go ahead and get started and let's cover todo el pedo. Okay, the first thing I want to do is obviously we want to get rid of these wires, this light pole, and these two little palm trees over here. I'm going to run my cleanup layer, just a duplicate of the background. And the first thing I'm going to try is I'm going to use the patch tool to select around this. And I'm going to cross my fingers. So I'm going to push Shift F5. You can also go to Edit and then Content Aware. I'm going to make sure my contents says Content Aware. And Photoshop will do its best job of automatically addressing that issue for me. So let's see if Photoshop does its magic. And I'm so jealous of you guys that are now getting into Photoshop. I've been using Photoshop since 2004. And we didn't have any of these kinds of tools at our disposal back in the day. So look at that. Just got rid of that pretty easily. What I'm probably going to do now for these wires is a couple options. I can either use the patch tool, the clone stamp, or the healing brush. It's really going to be dependent on each little section. So I'm going to see here real quick. I tried with the patch tool. Let's try with the patch tool. I don't think that the patch tool or the content aware is going to do, you know what? Let me do the manual way. I'm going to go to edit and then we're going to go content aware fill. And what I want to do is I want to erase what you see in green. I want to erase what's in green because I don't want it to add another little line there. It's going to give me a preview. Hey, you did a good job. Woohoo. Awesome. So let's do that again. I'm going to do that over here. So sometimes the menu route is the better option. Content aware fill. And it gives you a nice little preview. Sure, let me hit OK. I think it's going to be fine. Yay, wonderful. All right, so we got those two things out of the way, and it made two new layers. I don't even know why I did that, but I'm just going to merge them. I just pressed Control E to merge everything down. So we've got rid of those two big distractions now. The light poles, I'm going to go ahead and fast forward this part. Light poles, I'm going to use a mixture of the patch tool along with the healing brush to get rid of these light poles. And then we'll come back and we'll get rid of this little section here. So what I'm doing here is I just decided to make a new layer. I tried the patch tool, it wasn't working. So I'm making a new layer so that when I go with the healing brush, my hope is that when I'm brushing this, I'm going to set this to all layers as I'm sampling these pixels. As I start brushing this, my hope is that, and the healing brush is not going to work, so I'm going to for sure just use the clone stamp, is I'm just going to brush it over and then I'm going to mask it and then erase it. So that's what I've decided for this little section here. All right, looks like I have all the distractions out. So I'm going to push Control E to merge it all together. So we still have the layer 1. So if I click, this is the before and after of me just going ahead and cleaning up everything. So now we're on to the fun stuff, which is frequency separation and dodge and burn. So I'm going to go into my actions. I'm going to come in here into my frequency separation. I'm going to go ahead and run that. And then we'll try to figure out what radius number is going to look best for this as I edit this for a second time. So I'm going to zoom in here. And looks like 10 is looking pretty good. I usually like to go a little bit higher than what I initially think. So I'm probably going to go 13. I'm gonna make sure I'm gonna look at the entire body, especially the legs, because I use more frequency separation, at least as of late. I'm using it more for the legs than I am for the facial features. So I think 15 looks good. I'm gonna hit OK. And of course, I'm gonna go in here into my helper layers. I'm probably gonna reduce the contrast a little bit. I'll leave it like that. And the first thing I'll address is the texture layer. Let me see if on the texture layer, we have some of the hair. So I'm gonna kind of remove some of the hair here using the clone stamp. I'm gonna make sure we're on current layer. And I am just gonna sample areas like this, and we're gonna clean up some of the flyaways. There we go. And we might not get all the flyaways, because I think if you guys have seen this series, you guys already know how to do this part. So it's pretty straightforward. But those of you that are new, all I'm doing, because I've separated texture and color, I'm able to easily remove the hair because it is on the texture layer. I'm not moving any color necessarily. Now there are going to be some parts where it's going to get blotchy, as you can see here. So I'm going to have to use the mixer brush in a little bit if I decide to kind of narrow down here on the flyaways. Haven't decided if I'm going to get too crazy with the flyaways there. I think I'm going to leave them for the most part. I think it'll be fine. Clean some of these up. Okay. So yeah, we're going to leave it like that. I'm going to go into my color layer now. We're going to go to the mixer brush. There are some areas that the color is getting a little blotchy because of that, the separation of the texture. So all I'm doing now is I'm just pushing this color in to kind of blend these together. Same thing here, pushing that color in. And if you're curious, this is what I'm doing. This is what the color layer looks like. So as I'm on this layer, all I'm doing is I'm just getting these blues. If I want to tone down those browns, I just push that color down. And these are the settings up here, 50, 30, 50. And those are the settings that I've been working with lately that I think have been working good for me. So yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and take a look at this now. This is looking fine now. The hair, we'll leave that little hair like that. I think that'll be fine. What I do want to do now is I do want to come into the face and address some of the blemishes. And I'm going to right click, make sure my hardness is around 40, 35, that'll be fine. Just because as I'm moving this texture, I want to keep that texture with a little bit of that nice edge. So that's why I went about 35 there. So on this specific part, I'm going to go ahead and just fast forward this part, and then we'll continue on to the mixer brush in a moment. So as you can see here, I'm using the clone stamp to just move texture. That's what I like about frequency separation. It's very flexible. I'm not moving color throughout this whole process. I'm just moving the texture and I'm removing the blemishes. So it's cool in the fact that I am not moving the color throughout this entire process. So I love, love, love doing the blemish removal with frequency separation.
I hope you guys are enjoying the video so far, and I want to talk about today's sponsor, which is Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community for creatives. Skillshare offers thousands of inspiring classes for creative people on topics including photography, productivity, business, and more. Make great use of your downtime and check out Skillshare's online classes, which include a combination of video lessons and class projects. They have a wide range of categories from photography, film and video, and graphic design. One of the classes I enjoyed watching was Portrait Photography Working with Natural Light by Benjamin Heath,
One of my favorite things about this specific class is that it's under an hour. So I literally sat through the entire course, and I like it because it's very similar to the video you're just watching. Benjamin shows you his process from beginning to end on how he sets up the shoots, his planning, and the actual shooting aspect, of course. But then at the very end, he goes in Lightroom and he shows you some of his editing concepts. At the end of the class, Benjamin gives an assignment based off of everything he's taught in the class. And it's cool that you can look at other people that have seen this course and see some of the work that they've created after watching the portrait photography working with natural light. Skillshare offers a perfect opportunity to start learning new skills. For everything Skillshare offers, it's less than $10 a month with an annual subscription. The first 1,000 of my subscribers to click the link in the description will get a 2-month free trial of premium membership so you can explore your creativity. Now that the texture, I've removed the blemishes, we're gonna move on to the mixer brush, and we're gonna be pushing and mixing color to smooth out the inconsistencies in the skin. So I'm gonna come into my color layer now, and I'm gonna turn on my helper layer. This will just assist me in being able to see the tonal transitions. And as I mentioned earlier, is I am doing less frequency separation on the face, but I'm gonna do it here on the eye bags just a little bit. Just push this just to even it out, just so I can speed up my dodge and burn process in a moment. So I'm just gonna do a little bit here, a little bit there. And I'm gonna mainly do it on the legs, which frequency separation does a great job. I'm actually gonna reduce my contrast. I think it's a little too much. I can't really see it as much. Oh, that's just perfect. My upstore neighbors, now they're deciding to vacuum. So if you guys hear some random noises, it's my upstairs neighbors. It's kind of like that Geico commercial where they're like tapping. Yeah, that's what's going on right now. But anyways, we have some, she had some bruises on her leg because she went biking. Here in Texas, we have something called the Mission Trails. And so she was telling me that she had some bruises and stuff. So frequency separation is awesome to remove those kinds of things. So if we take the helper layer off, let me just show you what I did there. We removed those little sections there. So sometimes it's up to you if you want to use the helper layers. You don't necessarily need to use it. It can come in hand in certain situations. So in this specific example, I actually want to see where I am pushing color, especially in this area, because there's a lot of mixed colors because of the little redness here on the leg. So I just want to see where I'm pushing some of the stuff. So I just want to make sure things are looking good. There we go. And I think here we're doing fine. Let me even that out. So there's the before and after of just using the mixer brush just a little bit. Now we're going to move on to dodge and burn, and we're going to fix the inconsistencies in the face. We're going to use dodge to brighten up areas, and we're going to use burn to darken up areas. So I'm going to run my dodge and burn action. There we go. And I'm going to start off with dodge first. So I'm going to get my brush tool. And my new settings I've been using lately is 75 and 1% flow. And I usually like to start with the face first. And I'm just going to remove any areas that I feel need to be kind of smooth out. And I'm really enjoying the 75%, 1% flow. I feel like it slows down the process, which is good because it helps me kind of avoid going a little bit too much when I'm lightening up areas. So that's been working out for me. By all means, you guys should be experimenting to see what might work best for you guys. So I encourage you to experiment. So I'm just going to do a little bit of dodge and burn so that you guys can see the process, especially those of you that are new to the channel. If you're new to the channel, I just did frequency separation and I'm doing dodge and burn. And if you guys are new to this stuff and you have no idea what's going on, Don't worry, I have beginner level tutorials that I've already made. I'm going to leave the links in the description, so feel free to check those out. But for the most part, I'm probably going to fast forward this in a little bit because you guys know this will take me anywhere from like 15 to 20 minutes. It just depends on an image to image basis. Throughout my dodge and burn process, you're going to see me manipulating the contrast layer just so that I can see the different areas as I'm doing my dodge and burn so that I can smooth out any areas. Keep in mind when you get into the shadow areas, you want to lift up your shadows here on the curve so that you can see more of the inconsistencies. Let's take a look at what I've done with the face so far. So I'm going to hold Alt on the keyboard. This shows you where I've been dodging, and this shows you where I've been burning. So if I just click this is the before and then the after. I'm liking that so far. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go ahead and just look at the legs and the arms here, and then we'll get into the eyes and come back into those little spots some. So I think I'm done with my base local dodge and burn. I'm going to get into global now. So we're going to make some areas pop a little bit more. So I'm going to run another dodge separate. I'm going to raise this up actually. And then we're going to run another burn. And I'm just going to put a G after it so I know that this is my global. There we go. I'm going to add a threshold because I want to brighten up areas that should already be, have that nice pop. So I like dragging this and it'll show me which areas naturally got brightened. So right here on the forehead, the cheek, the nose, this area of the lip on top, and this other cheekbone, and then the lips. So I'm going to maybe go about right about here. I'm going to add a new layer. You don't have to do this, by the way. There's other ways you could probably do it. I've been doing it this long way, and I think somebody had commented, was like, hey man, you could probably do this. And I'm like, damn it, you're smart. But lately I've just been doing it like this. And I think it helps me just concentrate a little bit more and gives me like a general idea of where I'm going to have to brighten up the areas. So I apologize in advance if you guys know a better way of marking these areas, because there probably is. But I just like doing it like this. Good old Eli doing it the difficult way, right? There we go. So now that I have those areas marked, so that's pretty much telling me, I just marked there where I'm going to want to brighten up. So I'm going to get the brush tool. We're going to change the flow now to maybe about 4. And I'm going to make my brush a little bit larger, and I'm going to do like 1 click, maybe another little couple of clicks here to brighten it up. We're going to brighten it up here just with a couple of clicks. This one's only going to be like 1 click. It's from the opposite side of where the light was at, so this one shouldn't be as bright as this one. I'm going to add just a little bit of light here, a little bit of light there. 1 swipe with the nose, and then a little bit here. And then we'll get into the lips just a little bit. Because the light was camera right and it was coming down. This part of the lip probably should be a little bit brighter. So let me take off the red just so I can see what I've done. There we go. And that's the way I like it. I just like that subtle little pop. It's not that big of a pop. I am going to even out some of these transitions here on the lips real quick. So I'm going to come in here with my Dodge Global and just kind of even out some of these little areas. This is optional, by the way. You don't have to go on the lips. It really just depends on how picky you are. On this one, I'm going to go ahead and do it. Why not? There we go. All right. I'm going to zoom in over here too. I'm going to start brightening up areas around the eye that kind of already have those natural highlights. I'm definitely going to go here. Some areas right around here. Underneath the eye. About there. Let's go to the opposite side. And I'm just brightening up, once again, these little areas here. I'm going to get to the eye separately on its own kind of curved layer. So that should be a good starting point there. So let me see the before, after. Love it. Okay. I'm also going to start bringing up some of the hair. So I'm going to get the brush tool. Let's go about 9% flow this time, though. And I'm just going to brighten up just a couple of parts, not every little thing. Let's just get a couple of, and this is what helps your image look three-dimensional, guys, is adding a little bit of light to the areas that already have that natural brightness. So I'm just going to come in here. We'll go with the little earring there. And I think that should be fine with the Dodge Global. Now let's get to the burn. And so for the burn, what I'm going to want to do is I want to make this cheekbone just a little bit darker. So I'm going to go 4% flow here. And I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to do just a couple of swipes here. And a couple of swipes there. Underneath the lip. The side of the nose. The inside of the eyes right here. We're going to brush in the eyebrows. And let's take a look at what I've done right here. Like it. So let me actually go back to the Dodge. This is what I did with my Dodge, guys. This is what I've done with my burn so far. I am also going to stick with my burn. And I'm going to start burning things and darkening areas that I feel like would benefit to be a little bit darker. Side here. Let's emphasize this shadow underneath here. Let's darken that up, that part of the leg. There we go. Okay. So cool beans. Let me take a look at what I've done so far with just the local dodge and burn. Let's get a little bit closer. So I'm going to zoom in right about here. Before and the after. I'm digging it. Last little step before we move on is the eyes. So I'm going to run my eyes way action. And let's go 5% flow. Okay. And let me get this out of the way. I think somebody had mentioned last time that it was distracting. So let me get that out of the way. And let me come in here. I'm going to emphasize that catch light there because the light was coming opposite. There should be a little bit of light here. Going to add a little bit of light into the eye. Right there. And I think I screwed that up. Like again, I'm going to switch to my black brush and I'm going to just fade that off just a little bit. Okay. That's what's cool about using the layer masks. You can easily come back and fix this. It's like a non-destructive way of working. So I screwed that up there and I'm fixed it now. Let me see how that's looking so far. That's looking pretty good. I'm just going to lower the opacity. Always a good idea to lower the opacity just so that you don't go overboard. And it's just enough of a pop to make it look nice. Now that we're done with the skin retouching, we're going to move on to the color grading. But before we get into the color grading, let's take a look at the overall before and after of what we've done with frequency separation and the dodge and burn. So before and then the after. So to start off with my skin color grading, I always like to start with selective color. I don't push it too much, but I kind of just set like an easy overall base. So I'm going to put -5, I'm going to put 1 and then 3 here. And the reason why I love selective color is that I'm specifically targeting the reds. We know that the skin is going to be in the reds and it's also going to be in the yellows. So as I'm adjusting these numbers, you kind of have to play around with it and kind of see what kind of looks good to your eye. Now I have a selective color video if you want to know more about selective color. I'm going to now go into yellows. And this time we're going to go -3. We're going to go -1, and we're gonna go 3. So if we look at the before and after, it did just a subtle difference on the skin, and that's what my goal is, just to do a subtle difference. You'll see that the skin just got a little bit more yellow. Let me zoom in just a little bit more for those of you guys that maybe can't see. And that's all I needed right there, was just a little bit of a subtle difference. Now I want to color grade the background. And in order to do that, what I want to do is I want to make another selective color. So I'm going to rename this so we can stay nice and organized. I'm going to name this skin tone. And now I'm going to make another selective color. And we're going to name this color CG, color grade background. Okay. Now, as I start manipulating this, you're going to notice that she's also going to be affected as I'm adjusting these numbers. And I don't want that. I specifically want to adjust everything besides her. So I'm going to change and go to my history panel here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use my layer masks that come along with these adjustment layers. And I'm going to go to select subject. So select and then subject. What it's going to do is Photoshop's going to do its best job to obviously select Jessica here, and it did a great job. But what I want to do right now is that it has a hard edge. I want to make sure that we have a feathered, soft edge. So that kind of blends as I'm color grading and separating these two elements from Jessica and the background. So I want to feather it. So I have to have my lasso tool. I right click and then I feather. And I like to use 70. Feel free to use a different number if you want. So I'm going to hit OK there. And then now I'm going to go to edit. And I got to make sure I'm clicked on the layer mask, by the way. So I'm going to push Shift F5. It's just a shortcut. And I'm going to put contents and I want it to go to black. And the reason for that is I want you to take a look at this layer mask for those of you that are new to Photoshop. When I hit OK, what's happened is I've told this adjustment to now not affect Jessica. That's why she is marked in black. Any adjustments that I make is not going to affect her whatsoever. It's only going to adjust in the white areas of this layer mask. So now when I go into my selective color, and let's say we go reds, and I start manipulating everything, it is not going to manipulate her. So super cool. Okay. So I'm going to kind of mess around with these numbers here. I have a lot of numbers that I kind of played around with here. So I'm going to be entering those numbers. So I'm going to go into my yellows, and then I entered 2. I went 16, 31, and 9. And I have to emphasize, guys, as I'm entering these numbers, you have to experiment. You have to play around with these sliders. You gotta not be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to screw up. I screw up all the time. But just remember that those screw ups are gonna help you get better. Just reflect back and be like, okay, I'm never gonna do that again. That sucked, you know? So I'm gonna go 100 here on the blues. So take a look at the blues. Look what happened to those blues. I got those deep, rich blues back here with these adjustments, because the blues, obviously it's going to be under the cyans and it's also going to be the blues. So I'm going to come back into the blues. I'm going to go into my blacks. The black slider, by the way, it's just going to add more or less contrast to that specific tone that I have selected. So this is the before and after of what I did with the selective color and also using that mask technique. Now, I'm going to continue my color grading by now adding a color balance. So I'm going to come into my adjustment layers and we're going to go into color balance. And what I want to specifically target is the shadows. So I'm going to go into my shadows and I am going to add blues into my shadows. So I'm going to go about 29. And then I'm also going to add some magentas at -14. Now, the problem with the color balance is that I selected the shadows, but yet it's still adding blues and magentas into the midtones, and it still actually went into my highlights, which is very frustrating. It's kind of like, come on, color balance. I specifically told you shadows, and you're adding it to a lot of these other areas that I don't want. So what I want to do is I want to use something called blend if, so that I can be more specific on the specific shadows that I want this to affect. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click in this blank area put my cursor right here. I'm going to double click and you should get this layer style dialog box. And I'm going to need to move this to the side so you guys can see this. So we want the underlying layer. So we know that we don't want it in our highlights. So here what it's basically saying is we got our blacks, our shadows, our midtones, our highlights, and then our whites. So as I start bringing this down, it's going to take it away from the areas that I didn't want. Like, I don't know why it's even adding it into those highlights, because I told it in the shadows, but blend diff makes it a lot easier. So I'm gonna bring this number down to where I feel like it looks good. And I think around 99, if I can get it there, looks good. But then you'll notice, look at this kind of weird, awkward, hard edges that we're getting here on the leg. Okay, so I've already kind of told it, these are the areas I don't want that kind of tones to be in, but it's not fading off and blending really well. So I have to hold Alt here on this little triangle. I'm gonna call it a triangle. You guys can roast me if you want, because I don't know what this thing is called. I'm gonna hold Alt and I'm gonna break it apart. And now look what happens. It's gonna get that nice, beautiful fade instead of that ugly transition that we had earlier. So I'm gonna hit OK here. And now let's take a look at the before and after. So this is the before and then the after, okay? Now, if I feel like I went a little bit too far, I still have that flexibility of adjusting my opacity, which in my case, I think it's too much. I'm gonna go about 70. And let's hit this eyeball. And it looks okay. I'm actually gonna bring it down some more. Keep in mind, when I edit this image a second time, it's always gonna look a little bit different. I don't know if it's the same for you guys, but it's always gonna look a little bit different. But I like it at like 55. I think I can survive with 55. The next one we're gonna do is we're gonna add another color balance. And this time though, we're gonna target the highlights. So I wanna add -3 into my highlights, which are my bright areas in the image. I wanna add a little bit more yellows. I'm sorry, I was up here. So I'm adding some cyans into my highlights. Then I wanna add a little bit of greens by 1. And then I want to add -4 into my highlights. So if I hit the before and then the after, this is what it's adding. So it's adding it into this nice sky, adding just a little bit of those green tones in there, a little bit of those cyans, and then mixed in with those yellows. So once again, I'll just click that little eyeball before and after. And so far, that's looking nice. Before we move on, let's take a look at what I've done so far with the color grading. So I'm gonna group everything. I'm gonna click the topmost layer and I'm gonna hold Shift so I can grab everything. I'm gonna press Control G. And this is the before and then the after. Now we're still not done with the color grading. We're still gonna add a little bit more. So I'm gonna name this color grade. The next one that I'm gonna add is, I saved it into my libraries just to make it a little bit faster. And where is it? Ground, Jessica, curves, here it is. And I am gonna drag this in. We're gonna hold Alt. And this is the color grade that I added. Now this curves really kind of made these colors just a little bit more richer. So let's go into the properties, because I'm sure that's what you guys want to see, right? Let's go into the properties and let's take a look at what I did here. So the reds, I brought it down here, lifted up the blacks and the reds. The greens, I brought it in a little bit. Greens, brought it in that. And then the blues, brought it in a little bit on the blacks and brought it a little bit to the left. Now, how in the heck did I figure that out? And why did I even do it like that? I've been testing out this new panel. This is something that I bought, something that you might want to look into. You don't have to use it, but it's called the Retouching Toolkit Color Wheel. And what's cool is that when you use this, you can put like Create RGB here, and it'll make a color grading wheel over here. I'm just gonna kind of quickly go over this. I don't want to take up any more time than I need to. But when I do that, I can specifically target the highlights, and I can say, okay, I want orange in my highlights, and it'll automatically add that curve for me in the reds, the greens, and the blues. I can go into my midtone. So it's kind of very similar to Capture One. Okay. So you can do some really cool stuff. If you kind of tweak the colors in the right way, you can do some really cool stuff. You can adjust the strength and it'll adjust the curve for you. So I've been playing around with this lately, and that's how I got that specific curve. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this off. I'm gonna delete this for now. Okay. So that's how I got that specific curve there. The next one I'm going to do is I have an action that I like to use to add my contrast. So right here, contrast pop. Yep, there it is. Perfect. So I'm going to put stop. And now I am going to add contrast to the foreground here and the front to put less attention in this area. Probably going to add a little bit more contrast here to her wardrobe. Jessica did an amazing job with her wardrobe. Also, big shout out to Jessica. She, set up this shoot with us last minute. My friend Hector was coming down from Dallas. He wanted to shoot. So like 2 hours before the shoot, Jessica was like, yo, I'll help you guys out. And she came up with this dope outfit. So super cool. Let me add just a little bit more here. There we go. And I think we're good there. Awesome. So let's take a look at the overall color grade. So before and then after. Whew, looking good. I'm loving it. So now we're going to go into the raw Vato Loco. You know that I love to kind of do some more color grading once I have everything merged together, my frequency separation, dodge and burn, and kind of like my starting point with the color grade with selective color curves and color balance. Then we'll jump into the camera raw. Now, I did already save the settings just to make it a little bit faster, and we'll kind of skim through them really, really quick. So I am going to come in here and we're going to go into presets, and I should have one called Jessica YouTube. Here it is. And we're going to hit OK. Oops, no, we're not going to hit OK. We're going to take a look at the settings first, Eli. There we go. So here we go. So let's quickly look at them. I just brought up the exposure a little bit. We got our contrast, our blacks. Typically, I don't try to push it too much here. I just try to add whatever looks good. Nothing on the curves, just a little bit of sharpening there. I think the key one here is to play around with HSL, because what's cool about the HSL, what you don't get in Photoshop, which to me doesn't make a lot of sense, is like you get like an orange slider. You know how like in selective color, you don't have that, or in color balance? I'm surprised that we don't have that. So that's what's really cool about the HSL. You have more color options to kind of tweak. So I think that this helps out a lot to kind of enhance your color grade that you've done in Photoshop. So keep that in mind. I'm going to press Control Z there. I made a mistake there. There we go. So then I added some highlights and some shadows with the split toning. That's always nice to kind of work with. And then, of course, the good old faithful camera calibration. I'm still surprised that a lot of people are not messing with this. This has a lot of potential, guys. So if you're not using it, please experiment with it. Play around with the sliders. You can get some really cool stuff with this. So I'm going to add a little fade here. So I'm going to add a little bit of a gradient filter, and I'm going to bring down the exposure so we put less attention once again there. I'm going to bring the highlights down, and I'm going to hit OK. And that should be good. So let's take a look at the before and then the after. Look at that. Just brought that extra little pop, an extra little bit of life. If you guys are not using Camera Raw after you do your initial edit, I encourage you guys to use it. I think you can really make your images pop just a little bit more, and you don't need to push it like excessively. Just add a little bit of final touches to it. Okay, so far, this is looking really nice. I'm liking that. I'm going to now go into the LIQUIFY tool, and I'm going to see if maybe there's any areas in the hair that I need to kind of smooth out a little bit. So I'm going to get the forward warp tool, and I am just going to even out some of these little areas just real quick. This is an optional step. You don't need to do this, but this is just me being picky here. So there we go. We got that out of the way. Perfect. Now we're just going to add the final touches to the image. There's a couple of areas that I want to color grade just a little bit more, and then also some bright areas that I want to decrease using luminosity masks. So I'm going to come in here to my red loom action, and I'm going to push play. This is something that I like to use in my images. Sometimes it looks good and sometimes it doesn't. And then on this image, I love it. I think it looks great. So I'm going to just lower the opacity here to about 35%. That looks nice. Now, one of the issues that I have is this leg right here is a little bit too bright. And you got to think about it. I had my light camera right angled down. So obviously the light is going to hit the leg first, and the leg is going to be nice and bright. So I'm going to tone that down, but I want to, tone it down with the burn, but I want to selectively select those highlights and then brush only in that area. So I'm going to make a burn curves right here. And I'm also going to burn this area. This area got really bright because I had my secondary light over here. My friend Hector was holding it, and so the light hit the floor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use something called LUMENZIA, and I'm going to make a luminosity selection. So I'm making a selection based on luminosity values. So when I hit L2, you'll see that in this area in white, this is the area that I'm going to select. So when I try to darken it with burn, when I brush in, I'm only going to be brushing in and darkening these specific areas. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do select. And I am going to now burn those areas. So I'm going to bring down my flow. We're going to go about maybe 6%. And you're going to see that as I brush with this burn, right, because we know burn is going to darken, I'm only brushing in those specific areas that I selected based off of that luminosity selection. So I'm not going to come in here and accidentally darken up this leg because I didn't make that selection. I made a selection of the L2s, the light 2s there. Okay, so I'm going to do select, deselect. Let's take a look at the before and then the after. And so now I've put less attention on this leg and less attention on this little part over here. So if I hold Alt on the keyboard, you'll see that those are the specific areas that I darkened. Okay, so really cool. So now that I've got that out of the way, now I'm going to do my final color grading on the ground and then my final color grading on the overall image and then brighten up some other areas. So I saved some of these libraries so I didn't have to make them again. So I call this one ground. So we're going to drag this in and we're going to hold Alt here. So I believe, if I'm not mistaken, yes, it did save. It already has it as a mask. Woo! So I don't have to do it all over again. Super cool. So what I did, and this is just optional, I made it just a little bit more red. You might think that it's excessive, that I don't need to do it. That's totally fine. Just, take from this tutorial what works for you and what doesn't. But anyways, in order to get this color grade, what I like to use is I like to use the infinite color panel. A lot of times I like to experiment. My process is very organic, guys. A lot of times I don't know which direction I'm going to go in with the color grade. So I like to just experiment and just have fun. So that's how I got this specific colors for the ground. And a lot of it was just a mixture of the color lookup, selective color, and curves. Okay. So now I'm going to add another color grade. Now this was kind of like my final color grade of the overall image using, once again, the infinite color panel. So I'm going to drag this one in. So I'm going to drag it from my libraries. I already had it saved, holding Alt so that I can see all the layers. And you can see that this is what I really brought out, those rich tones. The only thing I'm going to need to fix is this color lookup. It did a bad job of following that mask. So I'm going to hold Control A to select everything, Shift F5. I'm going to fill it with white. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna do what we did earlier. We're gonna go to select and then subject. So on this color lookup, this specific one, I didn't like what it did to her skin tone. So I'm gonna remove this color grade from her. So I've already did the select subject. I'm gonna feather it. We're gonna do 70. And I'm sorry if I'm going fast, it's because I'm almost done with the tutorial and I wanna get it done. And then Shift F5. And then we're gonna go black and then hit OK. So now that color grade isn't happening on her. So if I click, this is the before and then the after. Now let's quickly go over it. So we have the color lookup that was from, once again, the infinite color panel, the gradient map, which is this specific color, the selective color, which has a bunch of stuff. You know what I'm probably going to do is I'm going to put the numbers on the screen because I don't want to cover everything. It's going to take too long. And then the curves, you can see there, this is what the curves that it added. So all done because of the infinite color panel. Now, the last thing that I want to do is I want to just add just a little bit of exposure to the face. And then this image is done. So now I'm going to go here to my adjustments. I'm going to go into levels. And I'm going to take a look at the histogram here. I can see that I can still add a little bit of brightness. So I'm going to drag this to the left. And I'm going to bring my blacks in just a little bit. And this is the before and then the after. And let me see if I can even bring up the midtones a little bit right about there. That looks good. I don't like to go overboard here. I've had the habit of doing that. So before and then the after. So overall, guys, that's it. We're done with this image. Let's zoom in here. And I think right about here should look good. Let's take a look at the before and after. So I'm going to hold Alt. This is the before. And then the after. Let's zoom in some more for those of you that want to see the skin retouching and the color grade a little bit better. And right here, the before and the after. Before, after. And that concludes the tutorial. Thank you so much for watching and supporting the channel. I truly appreciate it. And I'll see you guys on the next one.